Hello, everyone. Welcome to Blogging Theology Academy. Assalamu alaikum. I'm delighted you could join us for this special live stream Q&A, and we are introducing our groundbreaking new course, Understanding Ibn Taymiyya. It's a great honor to be joined today, actually, by the course instructor, Dr. Sharif El-Tobgui, who will be shedding light on this exciting new program and answering your questions, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Wa alaikum assalam. Well, Paul, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much for coming on. I think we'll just begin by going straight into the Blogging Theology Academy website, where everyone can see hopefully everything they need to about the course. Here we go, Understanding Ibn Taymiyya. And the course is based on this text, Ibn Taymiyya, on reason and revelation. But before we get into the details of the course, you say at the beginning here, master the thought of a crucial Islamic thinker and theologian of immense contemporary significance. But why is Ibn Taymiyya of such great significance, even 7 centuries after his lifetime? Why is he such an enduring perennial thinker and influence in the world?
Well, thank you. Yeah, that's a very good question. And in fact, when you say, 700 years later, in fact, Ibn Taymiyya, after his life, he died in 728 of the Hijrah, which is 1328 of the Christian era, born, I believe, in 1265. So he's a late 13th, early 14th century figure, Common Era. For a number of centuries after his death, of course, he had an impact. He was known, he was read, but his impact increased exponentially really in the 19th century, 18th, 19th century, the 18th century with the rise of the Wahhabi movement in current-day Saudi Arabia, and then 19th and 20th century movements. His thought is resurrected by various Salafi movements within modern kind of Islam, as well as reformist movements. And so people, look to his thought for different modern programs or programs in the modern world, and they take his thought in different directions. But it is interesting that it's really, I would say, in the last 200 years, he's become actually much more prominent than he was from his death until the early 19th century. So he was kind of dormant in a sense for a long time, and sort of became larger than life over the course of the past 2 centuries or so. And I think, for a number of reasons, like in his own time, he was definitely extremely well read, very, very knowledgeable in Quran, Hadith, in fiqh, all of the different madhahibs. It was said that never would he sit, he was a Ḥanbalī, but it was said that he would never would he sit with somebody from another madhab, like a scholar from one of the other legal schools, except that scholar would have learned something about his own madhab from Ibn Taymiyya. I mean, there might be some hyperbole like in these kinds of, adulations, but the point is that he was extremely well read. He was also very well read in theology, kalam, in philosophy, and in various like Sufi texts, including Ibn Arabi, whom he actually admired a great deal for many, many years, and read his Futuhat al-Makkiyya and actually benefited a great deal from it. And it's only when he got to his Fusus al-Hikam, which is this very short book, that he sort of said, oh my gosh, wow, like, I see like the implications of where some of this goes, or at least as he understood it, and he kind of turned against him. But for many years, he actually praised him very highly. So he's an interesting figure. He was also very controversial for a number of the stances that he took in his own day, both in terms of theology. He was accused of being an anthropomorphist, in other words, of likening Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to his creation. He was actually put in jail on several occasions on charges of anthropomorphism, or I would say he was arrested on charges of anthropomorphism. Whenever he had a trial and was able to explain himself, he was always acquitted. But, there were also like political reasons as well. In the Mamluk state as to why he ran into trouble, with the kind of the establishment. But, he had a very tumultuous life. He was in and out of jail. He was, the Mongols were invading Syria at the time, and he actually fought against them, like physically put his pen down, picked up the sword and went out and did jihad.
Well, this is what impressed me about that guy. He wasn't just an ivory tower scholar. He wasn't just a guy who read dusty old books and, wrote, his polemical works. He actually went out and fought. He did jihad. He was a brave man, an actual soldier who put his life on the line. But isn't there a story also? He did even more than that. Didn't he? He, with others, went to the Mongol actual leader to plead for the release of certain prisoners, Christian prisoners as well.
Exactly, Christian prisoners and Muslim prisoners. That's right.
Yeah. Put his life on the line there, because he could easily have been, taken and executed easily by a very kind of ruler. But still, he showed great courage there, I would have thought.
Yeah, absolutely. No, he was definitely someone of immense courage. And also, even people who opposed him never doubted his piety. They never doubted his sincerity. They never doubted his personal honor and his personal morality. So even when people, disagreed vehemently with him, they never attacked his person or his character. I mean, he was abrasive. It's true. He was reported to have been abrasive, not very tactful. I guess we'd say like social intelligence maybe was a little bit low. And so he wasn't always very diplomatic with the way he went about, engaging others. And it was even said by some that if he had just had a better way of presenting his ideas and dealing with other people without attacking them, he probably would have found many more people agreeing with him on a number of issues. But, when you attack someone, like there's just, we're not just brains in a vat, right? We're human beings with emotions and, a sense of honor and all of that. So if someone attacks you, it's only natural to kind of have a reaction, So anyway, there's a lot of issues like that involved as well. And, even when it came to like fiqh, he was a Ḥanbalī, as I said, but he was very independent minded in the sense that he would not have any scruples going against his own madhab. If he thought, in his own view, that the evidence, of in the hadith was stronger than the madhab, and even, like he went against sometimes the consensus of the four madhabs. For example, when it comes to the question of the triple talaq or the triple divorce, if a man says all in one sitting to his wife, anti taliq, anti taliq, anti taliq, you're divorced, you're divorced, you're divorced, does that count as a triple irrevocable divorce? Or does it just count as one divorce and then you have the waiting period and then he either takes her back? Or all of the all of the madhahib, the four schools of law, are agreed by consensus that this did count as a complete, full, irrevocable divorce. And he said no. He went against that, and he was actually arrested. That's one of the reasons. I think that was the last time he was arrested. It was on this, if I recall correctly. He was instructed not to give fatwas according to that view because it went against the consensus of all of the Sunni schools, and he kept doing so, and he was arrested for that, and eventually died in prison in Damascus in the citadel during his final incarceration.
That's extraordinary. A polymath, a soldier, a brave man, but also a guy with a character defect in the sense he was very abrasive and couldn't tolerate fools lightly. And of course, most of the people he met were probably fools compared to him. He was such a bright man, and as you say, perhaps not great social intelligence, but in terms of his intellectual and military prowess, and a remarkable human being nonetheless. So I just
please. Oh, so I do want to say also, because the modern, why does he become so popular in the modern age or so important? I think because he was iconoclastic, because he was not afraid to go against the settled kind of orthodoxy of his time, which is not necessarily good. I mean, one could judge that either way. But I'm just saying, because that was his persona, I think people in the modern era, when faced with Western modernity, colonialism, and all of these major challenges, many Muslims said, okay, what we're doing is not right. Of course, one reaction is to say, no, like we need to preserve the tradition, and that's our lifeboat until the day of judgment. And, that's like a very widespread and position. I think a lot of people felt anxiety about, we need to do something different. And for people who wanted to reform the tradition in the sense of, scaling back a lot of the complications that maybe had developed over the centuries with disciplines and subdisciplines and so many books that you have to study and commentaries and sub-commentaries, and it became very heavy. And people want to say, look, we need to kind of bypass a lot of that's too heavy. We need something lighter. He was saying, let's just go back to the Salaf, the Quran, the Sunnah, the first three generations. Of course, he takes into account what happens afterwards, but for him, what's really authoritative is only the Quran, the Sunnah of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and the first three generations of the Muslims, the Salaf, which is roughly the first 2 centuries. After that, everything is negotiable. And so take that approach, and there's, one can do this very irresponsibly too, where you just kind of ignore the whole tradition and just go back and, you end up reinventing the wheel. So it's not correct, I think, to just say, well, that's all just kind of needless accretions and complications. It's not true. Maybe
he wasn't anti madhab, was he? Like Al-Bani allegedly was. I mean,
no, he wasn't. He was a Ḥanbalī, but because he was so high in his knowledge, and I guess considered himself a mujtahid mutlaq, maybe, I don't think he ever claimed that, but he was not afraid to have his own opinion based on the evidence as he saw it, but he never called for abandoning madhabs. No. Even the Salafi movement never really called that until very recently. That's a relatively recent call, this kind of anti-madhabism in the way that we know it today. But I think so I think that's why you get some kind of modern Salafi movements go back to Ibn Taymiyya. He becomes one of their main sort of standard bearers, because he kind of authorizes this bypassing of at least much of the tradition and just going back to the original sources. Again, there's one can end up reinventing the wheel a lot when you do that, but I'm just saying that's why I think he was attractive. And then also on the other side for like modernists, because it's funny that very sort of textually strict and very conservative Salafis will tout Ibn Taymiyya and follow him, but then also you get kind of modernists who also resurrect him and kind of talk about him very positively, and they see in him also his decoupling or like loosening of the kind of binds of tradition. Is that the right word? Right. They say, okay, well, we just need someone to kind of like loosen the binds a little bit, and then we'll take it in a different direction. We'll take it, rather than into a textual literalism, we'll take it in a more kind of reform, revisionist, modernist direction. But they kind of appeal to him as, a traditional figure who kind of allows for a cutting of the cord, at least the way he's appropriated. Now, I would say that I think a lot of people who talk about Ibn Taymiyya today, and even who claim to follow him on both sides of the aisle, so to speak, many of them, I'm not talking about big scholars, but like a lot of, say, lay people, often have, I think, a simplistic and caricatured view of his thought. I think that he was, more nuanced than they give him credit for. I also think, despite his, apparent lack of tact, he was also more fair-minded than a lot of people who claim him. He praises Imam al-Ghazali. He calls him al-muta'allih, like, very pious, godly man. He praises a lot of the big kind of Ash'ari scholars, although he disagrees with them in their Ash'ari theology. I have in my book, there's a passage, I can't find it right now, where he says, anyone who knows their circumstances knows the great, how greatly they strove for the sake of Islam and for the deen of Allah. And no one who knows their circumstances would ever deny that. It's very kind of adulatory. Although he disagrees with them, he gives people their due right a lot more. I mean, he can be very polemical also, it's true. But, I've read like his Darʼ is 10 volumes long. So when you read all of that, I did come away with the impression that he gives people their due, he's not just constantly criticizing people.
That's the impression you get from some people. He's just someone who criticizes and attacked, and in a very kind of reactionary way. But that's very, very untrue. As you say, he could be generous and positive, and wanted to give people a fair due rather than just criticize them. No, this is very interesting. I think maybe it's a good time, if it's okay, to have a look at the course. So as we said a while ago, this is a special Blogging Theology Academy Q&A live stream. So if you have any questions about the course, particularly regarding Ibn Taymiyya, please put your comments or your questions there. And we're introducing our groundbreaking new course, Understanding Ibn Taymiyya. And our course instructor is Dr. Sharif El-Tobgui. And we'll come to your credentials and your work in a second. But Dr. Sharif will be shedding light on this exciting new program and answering your questions, inshallah. So let's go to the course on the website, the Blogging Theology Academy website, where it's all there. So here we go, Understanding Ibn Taymiyya. So if you go on bloggingtheologyacademy.com, just click on the additional courses at the top there. You will come to this webpage, Understanding Ibn Taymiyya, and this is the text that the course is based on. So, master the thought of a crucial Islamic thinker and theologian of immense contemporary significance. And we've been discussing just now why he is still of enduring importance 7 centuries after his lifetime. So this 13-week course explores the thought and methodology of Ibn Taymiyya, a towering figure of the early post-classical period of Islamic thought, and a major influence on many modern and contemporary Muslim thinkers and movements. We approach Ibn Taymiyya through his 10-volume magnum opus, meaning his great work, The Refutation of the Contradiction of Reason and Revelation, a major work which takes up a central polemic that recurs in every age under one guise or another, namely the relationship between human reason and divine revelation. The course explores the major themes of the work through systematically reading and analyzing Dr. Sharif El-Tobghi's book, which is on the left there, which is actually available, published by Brill on open access. So study with one of the world's top Ibn Taymiyya experts, and just scroll down. So Sharif El-Tobgui is Associate Professor of Arabic and Islamic Studies and Director of the Arabic Language Program at Brandeis University in the United States. He's published the aforementioned book and also translated another book called Ibn Taymiyya and the Attributes of God. This was very recently. And here we see the weekly topics. So it's a 13-week course, week 1 through to week 13. And we'll go through that in a minute and just give you some crucial data. Start date is September the 21st. So it's about 4 weeks time, duration 13 weeks. The level, admission requirements, there are no formal entry requirements. While a background in theology or philosophy may be helpful, the primary requirement is a genuine interest in theological inquiry. So you don't need to have any relevant qualifications formally, but you've got to be interested in this subject. The text itself is an advanced level. I've read the book. It's very readable, actually, very juicy, but it requires some serious study and application. We'll come to that as well. Fees. The course fee is $1,750 for the full 13-week program, but there is a 20% reduction, kind of an early bird reduction, if you like, for people who pay before the 5th of September. And flexible payment plans are also available subject to approval. They're the same there are limited number of scholarships available as well. Application process, online application form, deadline is the 19th of September. So you can see the details there. You can just click on apply now, which I'm going to do. Application form for the 2025 BT Academy Understanding Islam and Understanding Ibn Taymiyya, I should say, short course. And you just complete all the sections there. You can see for yourself and then submit your application. So I think it's a very straightforward process. So let's go back to, I'm just going to check the questions before we go any further. Thankfully, people have put some questions. Oh, yes, someone's put here, is Dr. Sharif's book open access? Wow, didn't know that. Yes, it is. Through generous support of, it is actually available. Otherwise, it would be rather expensive, I would imagine.
Yeah. I wanted to mention also, so the original hardcover, Brill books are notably expensive. Yeah. So this is like $150 or $160. I would not buy the hardcover. If you want a hard copy, which some people really do want to have the actual book, there is a softcover version.
Oh, right.
And this one is also available on Amazon or wherever. And I think it's $60 or $59. I mean, it's still a pretty penny. It's not cheap, but there's a big difference. It's, less than...
Yeah. It's definitely worthwhile if you want to add an addition to your library. This is a fantastic book, but this is the hard copy version. Just for completion's sake, you did actually publish recently another book, Ibn Taymiyya and the Attributes of God. It's translated from the German by your good self. by, and the author is Farid Suleiman. I don't know if that's his doctoral dissertation.
It was his dissertation, yes. It came out in German in 2019, and then the translation came out last year, 2024. Right. That's a superb piece of scholarship, by the way. So anyone who's interested in Ibn Taymiyya, I would definitely recommend looking at that book as well.
And indeed, this book was your doctoral dissertation as well,
yes.
and adapted for publishing, obviously by the same publisher, Brill. Do they realize when they called it Brill? Such a brilliant publisher. Do they realize that that's what it sounds like? I don't know.
It's very old. It was founded in the 17th century, actually.
Right. Okay.
Brill, yeah, in the Netherlands.
Okay, we're going to go back to the course on the website. Would you mind? Can we go through what the course is about, and maybe sort of touch on the weekly topics? Is that all right?
Sure. So the course, basically, we will be going through the book, my book, chapter by chapter, and discussing it and analyzing it in depth. As Paul said, it is a hefty tome in the sense that the material is not light. I hope it's readable. I'm glad to hear that it is readable, as readable as it can be for such a
No, I got my copy, and I went to my first ever Arab country. I've never been to an Arab country before. This is several years ago. It's a typical Englishman who doesn't go to anywhere interesting in the world. But I went to Bahrain, and I was completely clueless. So I booked myself into this tourist resort in the south of Bahrain, which had very few Arabs in it at all, actually. So, but I took this copy of your book with me. And I remember sitting by the beach reading it and absolutely absorbed by it. A fascinating reading. And I managed to escape the resort, went to the north of the island. I actually met Arabs and surprisingly, many who knew about my interest in Ibn Taymiyya. So I was introduced to an Ibn Taymiyya scholar in Bahrain, and it all became alive, but I had to leave the resort. But that's why I read it, and I must say the book is very readable. Not all books on subjects like this are readable, folks. You probably noticed, but this one is, and it is the text of the course. So I'm very confident that it will be rewarding and interesting, and profoundly, inshallah, enlightening as well. So I have no hesitation in personally recommending it. So sorry to interrupt you.
No, well, thank you very much for that. The vote of confidence there. So basically, the book consists of 6 chapters, and we'll be spending roughly 2 weeks on each chapter. So weeks 1 and 2, we will be looking at reason and revelation in Islam before Ibn Taymiyya. This is chapter 1 of the book. Of course, there's the introduction, so we'll talk about the introduction. And then chapter 1 is the longest chapter. It's almost 70 pages. But this gives a broad sweep of the whole discourse within the Islamic tradition on reason and revelation before Ibn Taymiyya. Of course, he comes in the 7th Islamic century, and he's considered sort of early post-classical. And so all of the kind of major classical thinkers have already come and gone by his time, and they've written their books. And, the questions that he raises are not new. They've already been debated for many centuries. So chapter 1 sort of gives a broad sweep of that intellectual history prior to his time. So we'll spend, 2 weeks going through that chapter and looking at that historical background. And then weeks 3 and 4 cover chapter 2. Chapter 2 has 6 parts. The first part is 4 sections, and that's what we'll be doing in week 3. It's Ibn Taymiyya's life, times, and his intellectual profile. So just, we need to know his his actual personal biography, his intellectual biography, something about his times, and then his intellectual profile. Where did he study, with whom, what did he read, what did he know? I already mentioned some of it, but of course we'll go into a lot more detail. And what books did he write? What range of topics did he take up, and in what major works? Of course, the taʿāruḍ, the book that I studied, that we'll be reading about in my study of it, is a 10-volume work. It's maybe his most important work, but he wrote other volumes, multi-volume works as well. Minhaj as-Sunnah Nabawiyya, for example, I think is 8 volumes, depending on the edition. And he wrote a number of other major works as well. And so we'll be having a look at that. Week 4 goes into, so it's Ibn Taymiyya's understanding of the reason revelation conflict. So in chapter 1, that's me as a modern kind of historian or scholar of intellectual history looking at the discourse as it developed before him. But then this is now looking at that same development from Ibn Taymiyya's own eyes, as can be gleaned from the Darʼ taʿāruḍ, the 10-volume work, because he talks a lot about how schools developed, how thinkers developed, how ideas developed, where they came from, how they changed, how they were justified, how they debated. He has his own kind of historical understanding of how this all came about. So that chapter traces his understanding of the conflict and how it came about, and also his view of previous attempts to solve it by other thinkers that came before him. Al-Ghazali, Ibn Rushd, for example, from the side of the philosophers, Ibn Sina, they each had their own kind of way of dealing with this alleged contradiction between reason and revelation. And so Ibn Taymiyya has a view also of those attempts, and he situates his own attempt vis-a-vis those previous attempts. So that's what we will be looking at in week 4. And then weeks 5 and 6 basically take up chapter 3 of the book, which is Ibn Taymiyya's critique of the so-called universal rule, al-qanun al-kulli. This was a rule that had been adopted by his day by the majority of the theologians, the mutakallimin, that basically said if a text of revelation, or if the obvious sense or the literal sense or the overt sense of a text of revelation conflicts with reason, something that is known by sound reason, then basically you could either accept both of them, which you can't do because that would be accepting a contradiction, or you could reject both, which would be also the law of the excluded middle, assuming that they're direct contradictories. Or you could prioritize revelation over reason and just say, well, reason was wrong there and we follow revelation, or you prioritize reason over revelation. And the idea here was that when there is such a conflict, you basically, according to the universal rule, you have to give precedence to reason over revelation. And then when it comes to revelation, you can either do tafwid, which means that you deny the literal meaning, which seems to be conflicting with reason, but you confine the true meaning, or you consign the true meaning to Allah. That's tafwid. Or you do ta'wil, which is figurative interpretation, where you say the literal meaning is not admissible because it contradicts with reason, and so we must interpret the verse in question metaphorically, and here's a metaphorical meaning that it could be implying. Ibn Taymiyya disagrees with this rule altogether, and has many arguments against it. In fact, the very first page of the Darʼ taʿāruḍ, he quotes this rule as stated by al-Razi, who came before him, just before him, and then he says, وَهَذَا بَاطِلٌ مِّن وُجُوهٍ. This is invalid from a number of different angles. And he says there are 44 different angles that I'm going to critique this from. And so basically, he says al-wajh al-awwal, the first angle, and he talks about that. And the whole book is ostensibly a refutation of this universal rule. But in fact, he gets into so many other issues and many digressions and diversions, which is why it's 10 volumes long. So anyway, we're going to look at his critique of the universal rule, why he thinks it's incoherent, even from just a logical perspective, the way it's constructed, and what are the different categories of arguments that he makes against it. That'll be weeks 5 and 6. And then in weeks 7 and 8 and 9 and 10, we're going to be looking at Ibn Taymiyya's kind of substantive engagement with questions of hermeneutics, so reading and understanding texts, his understanding of how language works. Of course, the Quran is a book. It's revealed in a language, the Arabic language. So he has certain views on how language in general works for human beings. And of course, the Quranic use of language, although it's divine speech, nevertheless, Allah is addressing us in our language, in a human language. So what are his views of language, how language works, how meaning is determined in language? How are we to understand texts that came about in the time prior to us? What are the different principles involved in doing that? So that is basically weeks 7 and 8. Sahih al-manqul, this is his terminology, meaning authentic transmission or authentic revelation. So what is revelation? What is revelation? What is language? What is meaning? What is exegesis? How do we understand text? And so on and so forth. Okay. And then, obviously, if you're going to say reason and revelation either contradict or don't contradict, you need to know what it is that revelation is saying. And you also need to know what it is that reason is saying. So chapter 4 of the book, which is, corresponds to weeks 7 and 8, that looks at the first question, what is revelation? basically, and how do we understand it? How do we know what it's saying? And then weeks 9 and 10 look at chapter 5 in the book, which is called Sarih al-Ma'qul, or, it's like pure reason or clear reason. What is reason? So again, if reason and revelation allegedly conflict or don't conflict, well, okay, now we know what revelation is for Ibn Taymiyya and how it should be understood. Well, what is reason? What does reason consist of? What kinds of propositions are contained in reason? What kind of things go wrong when people try to reason? What are some of the mistakes that he thinks that the philosophers made in their conceptualization of things like universals and abstract essences, which he thinks runs them into a lot of problems, particularly when it comes to interpreting revelation, but also more generally in terms of their ontology, in terms of their metaphysics. And so what is reason and what isn't reason? What is it and what is it not? Right? Because he critiques notions of reason that had come before him or that were taken for granted by his contemporaries and his predecessors. So that's 9 and 10. And then week 11 is chapter 6. That's the only chapter that has just 1 week because it's actually a considerably shorter chapter than the rest of them. Chapter 6 brings it all together. And, Ibn Taymiyya's critique of the universal rule, his linguistics or linguistic theory, if we can put it that way, also his epistemology, his ontology, his metaphysics, all of these things that have come out in chapters 4 and 5, we bring it all together to show how he applies these principles to a very specific issue, which for him was the overriding concern, which was the question of the divine attributes and how to understand them, particularly the ones that were thought to be, to imply anthropomorphism, like God's hand, God's eyes, settling on the throne, Ar-Rahmanu ala al-Arsh istawa, the All-Merciful has assumed the throne or settled on the throne. Most of the mutakallimin said, well, if we affirm these in their literal sense, this would be anthropomorphic. It would imply that God has a body. A body is an imperfection. So, it can't really imply these things literally, and so it must mean something else. So how does he bring all of his principles and tools to bear on, in practice on the specific question of the divine attributes? That's what we look at in week 11, which again corresponds to chapter 6, which is the final chapter of the book. And then in week 12, we do a review of the major themes of the Darʼ taʿāruḍ. Again, it is a meaty text. And so I think after going through the whole text, it behooves us to kind of take a step back. It might also be a catch-up week if we have some things to finish, but just to kind of, take a step back and say, where have we gone? Where have we been? What have we learned? And then in the final week of the class, week 13, I named it An Eye to Contemporary Applications, because really my main topic in this book, I think I told you this, Paul, when we spoke. His work is called, Refutation of the Contradiction of Reason and Revelation by Ibn Taymiyya. I was primarily attracted by the title more than by the author.
Yes.
In other words, I didn't come at this from the point of, I'm a Taymiyyan and I want to see what did Ibn Taymiyya write and what's his most important work, because I'm interested mostly in Ibn Taymiyya. I came about it from the position of someone who's very interested in questions of reason and revelation, in epistemology particularly, because I think that issue comes up in every day and age under a different guise. And so in his day, the alleged conflicts between reason and revelation had to do with the particular intellectual environment of the time, which was, influenced by Greek philosophy and various assumptions and so forth. In our day, modernity kind of overthrows Aristotle along with other things. And so that legacy is no longer directly relevant. But if you ask what is the major manifestation of reason in the modern world for the Enlightenment and beyond, it's basically empirical science.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that the major kind of, philosophy itself takes a big hit in the modern world.
Yeah.
The possibility of philosophy, the possibility of metaphysics, especially after Kant. But the major manifestation of which modern civilization is most proud is human reason going to work on investigating the empirical world, deriving theories about it, and so on and so forth. And what are the major conflicts that we've seen, particularly in the Christian tradition, between reason and revelation? It's been between the Bible and kind of scientific claims, scientific theories, sometimes scientific facts also, right? And so you have this new kind of this new manifestation of the same tension between, okay, revelation says something, and reason, whether it's philosophical reason, scientific reason, ethical reason. I think for many Muslims today and non-Muslims, a lot of questions that come up between reason and revelation are ethical issues. Well, we know, quote unquote, from our modern liberal egalitarian sensibilities, individualistic, so on and so forth, we have very specific ideas of what is right and wrong. And we feel that, well, that's just reasonable. Of course, everybody's totally equal. Men and women are completely equal, and whatever it is, right? And then you read the Quran and you see, well, wait a minute, men get twice the inheritance of women. Or, Allah says, "Laysa dhakaru kal untha," the male is not like the female. They're alike in many, many respects, but they're different in other respects. And this is very grating to the modern sensibility. Also, the Quran, for example, it regulates, but it doesn't outright ban slavery. For example, for the modern person, there's nothing more obvious than, okay, that slavery is the greatest evil in the world, and any ethical system worth its salt would obviously just outright ban it. So this is a critique against, but wait a minute, how do you now reconcile what reason, I mean, I'm using reason very broadly here, allegedly tells you about morals and ethics, right? And it looks like this revelation, or what you're claiming to be revelation, contradicts with that. What do you do? So it's the same thing. Do I reinterpret revelation? Do I question my reason and how reason has been constructed in my particular time and place? Or do I take that construction of reason for granted and then say, well, we must reinterpret revelation? Or do I historicize it, which is another way of dealing with it? Historicization is kind of a modern method for going about diffusing tensions between religious texts, be it the Bible or the Quran, and what are thought to be and what sometimes are kind of like, conflicts with modern knowledge or what's thought to be knowledge and so forth. So again, for me, I very much enjoyed reading Ibn Taymiyya. I very much enjoyed getting to know him. I feel I benefited a great deal. But I don't consider myself a Taymiyist, in the sense that I'm a lifelong kind of expert in Ibn Taymiyya or something like that. It's really the issue itself. And because he wrote 10 volumes on it, and because he came after the classical period had already developed, I figured, well, he must be saying something interesting in 10 volumes. And in order to even understand what he's saying, it's going to require me to be familiar also with the whole classical tradition, so I can even follow the discussion. And so that's kind of what was, attracted me to the book. But really, it's the issue itself. And the only reason I spent so much time reading it and writing the book is only because I thought, or I hoped, and do hope, that there's something to be gained from it that we can use as Muslims in the modern age to orient ourselves towards, questions that come up today. I'm not interested in being just a scholar who's interested in some, like the market in Damascus in the 11th century, or some very obscure kind of topic that just has purely historical, import. That's not for me personally, this would be a waste of time. Other people, that's fine if they're interested, but I'm not a historian. I'm interested in practical applications. And so at least in week 13, at least pointing directions towards what are some of the issues that come up and how can we start to tackle some of them by doing, in a sense, what Ibn Taymiyya did, which was try to go to the very premises, the unspoken assumptions, the musallamat, and question those. Because if Muslims don't do that in the modern age, we'll have a great deal of postmodern age, we'll have a great deal of difficulty, I think, being confident in defending our faith and showing its truth, right? Because there's so many layers of assumptions that we really have to go to the very basic assumption, say, wait a minute, this very basic assumption of modernity, which is maybe 400 years old and completely taken for granted by everyone in the modern world, guess what? We reject it and we challenge it philosophically, and here's why. And if we don't accept that, well, then we don't accept, the consequences that come downstream 300-400 years later, ethically or, philosophically or whatever. But that takes, really going to the roots. Of course, we can't do that all in week 13. And, it takes brilliant, great minds and philosophers to do things like that. Anyway, I mean, it's not something I could probably do myself, but, just to point directions to how we can, go about trying to answer some of the questions. Today. So
absolutely, well said. And there's a quote here on the webpage. By the way, do visit bloggingtheologyacademy.com for more information about the course on Ibn Taymiyya. And we've written in the bottom of the page about Ibn Taymiyya: graduates of BT Academy emerge with a sense of genuine empowerment, enabling them to contribute to the environment in a manner that is confident, compassionate, and informed, rather than just reactive, and rooted in a profound and detailed understanding of both the Western and Islamic intellectual and religious traditions. So we're not about straw-manning the West or critiquing it in a destructive way. We want to understand it, but also we need to understand our own intellectual, as Muslims, our own intellectual and religious traditions. And that's why this course is so important, to equip us to critically engage with contemporary understandings of knowledge, whether it be science or other rational discourses, to critique them from an Islamic perspective, because Ibn Taymiyya also gives us those tools to critique it as well, that seem to have endured through the centuries. It's not just an archaic bit of knowledge. It has principles which seem to be extremely relevant to today and have contemporary applications, as we read in week 13, an eye to contemporary applications of this work by Ibn Taymiyya. So please do have a look at the website. Course starts September 21st. You don't need necessarily any relevant formal entry qualifications, although a background in philosophy or theology is helpful. But your main requirement really is a genuine interest and aptitude in theological inquiry and reasoning. This is an advanced course. It's not elementary at all. Although if you're new to it, as long as you have the aptitude and the interest, you can certainly benefit, I think. The fees, the course fee in American dollars is $1,750 for the full 13-week program. However, if you complete payment by Friday, September the 5th, 2025, obviously, you'll get a reduction of 20%, an early payment reduction. And flexible payment plans are also available, subject to approval. And also there are a limited number of scholarships available on request, of course. So it's a 13-week course. I'm certainly looking forward to it myself. And those are each of the 13 weeks, as we've just been through them in detail. And if you have any questions, just looking through the comments, there's one actually on a slightly different subject, is the book we mentioned earlier on Ibn Taymiyya and the Sifat, the attributes of God. Is that also open access, like your magnum opus?
It's not open access, but there may be a PDF of it available online, but it's not open access.
Okay.
And also it's not come out in soft cover yet, because they usually wait 2 years. So I don't know if they'll be doing a soft cover version of it, but right now, officially, there's only the hard cover.
Right. Yeah. Fair enough. So if you have any questions, do go ahead and ask them. But this is a great opportunity, I think, to understand one of the most consequential and influential Islamic thinkers in our modern era, actually, based on this text, Ibn Taymiyya, on reason and revelation, a study of the refutation of the contradiction of reason and revelation by one of the world's top Ibn Taymiyya experts, our very own Sharif El-Tobgui, Professor of Arabic and Islamic Studies. So, yeah, do you have anything else you wanted to add, Dr. Tobgui?
No, I think I pretty much said, what I had to say regarding the conception of the course and the goals I have for it. And just to reiterate what you said, Paul, if someone doesn't have a background but they're interested, definitely, more than welcome to join. We will be reading the book. This will be our main text. There may be some slight, small readings assigned in addition to this, maybe an article here or there. I haven't decided yet, but it will be minimal. I mean, the main reading will be this book. So, and I do expect people to have read it before coming to, class. As you mentioned, it is detailed stuff and something that takes time to read and reflect upon and things like that. So the idea is not that students are just coming to kind of passively listen as I explain it, but that they come prepared, come having read, absorbed, thought about the material, and so that we can have a, productive and also interactive classroom. I expect students to come and be ready to participate and to share their ideas and to share their understanding. So as long as someone is willing to do that, it shouldn't be overwhelming. The whole book is 300 pages, and we're doing it over 12 weeks. So, I mean, do the math. I mean, that's not maybe 25 pages a week. Yeah, exactly. I mean, some weeks a little bit more, some weeks a little bit less, but that's not a huge amount of reading. I think that's quite reasonable. So I think it should be doable.
Bernadette Tomi has written, no questions, but a big thanks for the information about this scholar. The depth and breadth of his teaching seems immense and very exciting. Yeah, thank you for that. I completely agree, actually. So just also mention that you can apply, of course, on the website. Just click on the application tab, application form for the 2025 BT Academy Understanding Ibn Taymiyya short course. The usual questions there. Personal statement at the end is also requested, so we have some idea of where you're coming from intellectually in terms of your background and qualifications. If you have any questions, you can ask on the BT Academy website. There's a general kind of course inquiry tab you can click on if you've got any more general questions about the course. So yeah.
And I would just again, if anyone came later or didn't hear the beginning, the book is available open access. So if you just go to the Brill website, you can download the entire book completely for free, and it's totally legal to do that. You can download chapter by chapter, so a PDF of each separate chapter, or you can download one PDF with the entire book and the appendices and the glossary and all of that. So it's up to you. And then also for people who do prefer to have a hard copy, there is this soft cover version, which is I think $60 again. So it is much cheaper than the original hardcover, which is something 150 or 160. So again, for people who want a hardcover, go for the soft copy. It's cheaper, or just download it from the website's open access. So it's zero cost, for the materials. Potentially.
Yeah, that's a good point. Someone's asking about course fees. We covered that earlier, of course, but just to reiterate, the course fee is $1,750 for the full 13-week program. Students who complete payment by the September the 5th will receive a 20% early payment reduction, so early bird reduction if you paid before that date. But flexible payment plans are also available subject to approval, including a limited small number of scholarships for those who might qualify for that. So there's different kind of payment plans there, as you can see. Answers that question. Just looking at I don't know if you want to get into this subject now, Dr. El-Tobgui. Was Ibn Taymiyya anthropomorphic in his beliefs, or was he misunderstood? Is that something we want to deal with now? Or is that too off topic and getting into?
Yeah, I think that'll come, through our study of the
right. Yeah, indeed, it's obviously
material. I mean, that's sort of the $60,000 question, right? So.
Is that how much it costs these days? I thought it got up a bit, but apparently it's still $64,000.
Exactly,
Still good value for money, although not as expensive as it used to be.
That's right.
Because of inflation, of course. Just scrolling through the scholars, the questions, even comments. I mean, we can't go into this now, and I'm not expecting you to, but it's a very interesting question. Could you share general thoughts on Yasser Qadhi's PhD thesis? Because I read that too. I've actually read 2 PhD theses, just you and Yasser Qadhi, and I found it extremely interesting, quite different from yours, I must say. But I do recommend it as a very interesting read. You can read it online somewhere. I think it was Yale. You can dig it out, the PDF file.
I think so. Yeah, it should be available. Yeah.
Without going into it, have you read it yourself?
I've read parts of it. I've not read the entire thing.
Yeah. But we're not going to go into that now. It's not obviously relevant to our questioning here. Let's have a look. Yeah, again, there's some other questions here. I subscribe to the Maliki tradition myself, but it's important to know the differences and try to. Okay, no, that's a good. That's a good one.
I'm a Hanafi, by the way. People don't know that.
Yeah, I knew. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, if you've got any more questions, this is perhaps we'll conclude shortly. But if you have any more pressing questions about the course, please do bring them up now. But as I said before, if you want to look for the course in more detail, please go to the bloggingtheologyacademy.com website, where you'll find lots of further information about admission requirements, application process and deadline, course start date and duration, and a further a summary of the course and the course instructor's qualifications, his expertise, his publishing history, details of the weekly topics, which we've been through in some considerable detail already. And as I say, the application form, you can apply now. So applications are open now. We've already had applications, I'm glad to say, as I've been advertising it on my social media platforms. So there have been some applications already, which is nice. There's some more questions. I don't think they're going to be terribly relevant to the course. Yeah. So yeah. So we might conclude here. Do you have any final words, sir, before we wrap up?
No, just to thank you so much, Paul, for inviting me to give this course. I'm very honored to be able to offer it on such an august platform, and I'm really looking forward to it. And I really hope that we have a good crop of bright minds and inquisitive people who are ready to come and learn. I'm very much looking forward to it. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
Absolutely. There have been some final comments we're not going to go into now, because as you've already said, this is the $64,000 question. How did Ibn Taymiyya interpret the ambiguous verses about Allah's attributes compared to other scholars? These are the kinds of topics that will be addressed on the course, and we really need to go into some depth before we can even talk about them. So if you want to know more, apply now on the course. Go to the website bloggingtheologyacademy.com and give yourself an education of a lifetime, inshallah. So thank you very much indeed, Professor Sharif El-Tobgui. Really look forward to seeing you on the course. There will be another a video perhaps for those who have enrolled on the course, but that will be in the near future, inshallah. But thank you very much, and goodbye, everyone, and leave your comments on the below, and hopefully we'll see you in the course next time. So assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you.